One of the things that I want to tell you is that some of the things that I say to you today are probably going to, you're probably going to walk away from here and say, you know, McNickle thinks the worst thing in the world that ever happened to the world is the internet. That's not true. So I'm giving you this spiel up front so that you'll know as we go along here that I carry a leash. This thing has more computing power than the NASA moonshots did, both in Houston and in the capsules and the landing units and all of that combined. This thing has more computing power than all of those machines at the time. It keeps me informed of what's going on around town, and I use a lot of data on it, quite frankly. But, I'm sorry? Leash. It's my leash. Yes. It's with me 24 hours a day. And it can cause me to have to get out of bed or wake up or all kinds of things. So, also, we live in an education community, and I would be remiss if I didn't give you a test. So I'm going to start these around both directions. Take them with you, take them home with you, look at them after you get home. It is kind of a test, but I won't be collecting them or grading them. So if you'll just pass them around as we go here. Let me start off by saying that I'm going to talk about fraud and identity theft today, and it's probably one of the largest problems that we have in the United States in terms of growing crime. And it's very difficult to investigate because there's not much of a face or fingerprints or anything else that goes along with the kind of fraud that we're going to talk about today. It all deals with ones and zeros out there in cyberspace, traveling over the internet, and IP addresses and all kinds of things, and jurisdictional lines. A lot of these things occur in foreign countries, and people are duped. But I want to tell you that just those mature Americans that are caught up in internet fraud and identity theft in the United States lose $2.6 billion with a B dollars a year. $2.6 billion. A lot of money, no matter how you cut the cake. And a lot of it is done through credit card fraud or through the internet, and a lot of things that we're going to talk about here today. So I told you that you're going to think that I don't use the internet. I want to tell you that I pay all my bills over the internet. The fact of the matter is there is but one bill, and that I have to actually write out a check and put a stamp on an envelope and send it, and that's to Colorado because the little bitty town's not big enough to accept electronic transactions. But I have a debit card. I didn't until my wife and I got together because I thought they were evil. She convinced me as a banker that they weren't. I have 2 credit cards that I pay off every month, and I choose which one I use by determining who has the best cashback program. So that's what I do. But on the back of all 3 of these, and I'll hold these up, some of them are kind of faded. But on the back of all 3 of these, there's a signature box, and they want you to sign it when you get it. And I don't do that. It says SEEID. And I've had people tell me, well, if you do that, they won't accept it. I've never had any of them turned down. In fact, probably 99 times out of 100, when I use one of these things, nobody ever looks at the back of it. And when somebody does actually walk up to me and say, I need to see your ID, I heap praise upon them because they are the folks that keep fraud with these things from occurring. So if you put your signature on here and you lose one of them, they have your signature. And it doesn't take but an hour or so practicing with pen and paper to get your signature down so close that you probably couldn't recognize it. I have a secretary that I would trust with my life, and I'm glad that she doesn't have access to my bank accounts because she's got my signature down pretty good. So that's one thing that you need to know. The other thing is that within the next few years, and I believe the deadline's 2016 or 2018, all of these cards are going to have, and some of them you may have this, are going to have what's known as RFID, an RFID chip. And that's radio frequency identification. In fact, I have one of those cards here. This is my ID, and the back of it is actually the key to City Hall. And it's got, although the card's pretty good size, that's so you don't lose it, it's got a little bitty chip in it, and I wave this at a door. I just need to get close to it, kind of wave the card at it, and the door unlocks, or the door goes up, or whatever. And that way I don't look like Captain Kangaroo carrying around a lot of keys. But they're going to go on your credit cards. When you get one of those, it will actually have a little square on it somewhere that says RFID. And when you receive that, you will also receive a sleeve. And the credit card goes in the sleeve. The reason that it goes in the sleeve is that the crooks, the RFID is already in operation in Europe. And in fact, the matter is the old magnetic strips on the back, they don't even use anymore in most places. And they use RFID. So to do the transaction, instead of swiping your card and punching in a bunch of numbers, you just wave the thing at it, put it back in your pocket, and you're done.
Is that the way car keys now? When you can just...
Yeah, when you don't have to actually put the key in the, yes. But at any rate, that sleeve they send you is very important because the crooks already have a device that will read that RFID while it's in your wallet or your pocket or your purse or wherever it may be. So use those sleeves, or you can look like kind of a nut and wrap them up in foil. But I'd rather look like a nut than have my credit card information stolen. So recommend you do that. Any questions about that?
Well, is the sleeve made of some particular kind of special material?
It is. It just prohibits that or disables the electronic signal that RFID chip puts out from leaving your pocket or leaving the sleeve. It's kind of like lead shielding when you have an X-ray. So.
And what does RFID stand for?
Radio frequency identification. That's what RFID stands for. So I'm going to put these away before I lose them.
Somewhere that if you put aluminum in your wallet and the card's inside the aluminum, it would do the same thing.
It would, yes. And they actually sell wallets now that have that protection built into it. So that's something you need to know that there hadn't been a whole lot of publicity about in the United States. And I want you to know that almost anyone can be victim of the things that we're going to talk about today. I'll tell you a story about the widow of a retired sergeant at the Stillwater Police Department several years ago. She was an avid contest enterer. She entered every contest she could find. In fact, the matter is, when we went to her house, you had to weave your way through little rows of space in the floor where she had stacked up stuff. I guess you call it hoarding, where she could go through all these magazines and enter contests. Well, she entered so many of them, the crooks have a way of finding these things, that she got a call from a fellow that said, "You've won big time, and Ed McMahon's ready to come to your house in a limousine, and you've won $1 million, and he's waiting to come, but you have to pay up front the taxes and fees." And she asked him how much the taxes and fees were, and he said, "Well, how much do you have?" And she answered him. And he said, well, $10,000 would be perfect. So you get $10,000 in cash and you FedEx it to this box in California. Well, she went to a local bank and she cashed it. She cleaned her account out. It literally cleaned it out. And bear in mind, she's a widow on a pension that was left from her police officer husband, and they aren't huge pensions. She was in her
80s?
late 70s, early 80s. But she'd been entering contests for years and years and years. And she grew up in kind of law enforcement background. I mean, she heard all these stories, and so nobody's immune. And so anyway, she took $10,000 in cash to FedEx and put it in the mail. Fortunately, a person at the bank, against the rules, and I really admired this person because she thought there was something wrong, ended up contacting a niece that lived here in town of this woman. And she said, oh no, there's absolutely no reason for her to be withdrawing that kind of money, and actually went to the house and said, you know, Grandma, what'd you do? She told her. And so fortunately, she was a dispatcher at OSU PD, and she got a hold of me. We managed to get the authorities in LA to meet the aircraft that landed out there and got the $10,000 off the plane and got it back to us. The problem with these things is y'all know what a mail drop is? Mail drop is a place where you can anonymously have mail sent, and that's how these folks operate. They staked that mail drop out for several weeks and never could find anybody going to pick up the stuff. But at any rate, I sat across from her, and she's now deceased. I sat across from her in her rather crowded living room and talked to her sternly. And she told me she understood, she'd never do it again, and that kind of thing. And fortunately, we had I guess I said niece a while ago, granddaughter. We had the granddaughter placed on her account at the bank as a guardian. And I'll kiss your foot if a couple of weeks later this guy didn't call back and say, Ed's waiting, and how come you haven't sent the money? And she tried to do it again. So, the other thing that happens is that you will receive in the mail mailings with checks in them, and some of these have been kind of redacted and some of them haven't, but I have permission of the folks that receive these to put them out. And I have stood in the lobby of the police department and literally watched people cry because they thought that their troubles were all over because they had received these fabulous winnings. But interestingly enough, they had never entered, and you can pass those around. I would like to have those back when we're done. But there's all kinds of ways that this can happen. You know, I'm of Irish descent. You might be able to tell by the name McNickle, and I won the Irish lottery one time. I found that kind of interesting since I'd never entered. And in general, what they do is they send you a check, or they send you a thing that says that you've won $1,650,000, and all you have to do is send us a processing fee of $1,850. And we will process your claim, and you know, this is a big super secret surprise. We want to televise the fact, or we want to publicize the fact that you won, but not until we put the check in your hand, and gosh, don't tell anybody or it won't go through. And so you send them $1,850, and they now have, what do they have? They have your bank routing number, they have your bank account number, they have your address, your phone number, all kinds of things, and they start either writing checks or they wash the check. Does anybody know what check washing is? They actually use a chemical process where they can get the ink off the check, and they make it out because they have your routing number, they have your account number. They call the bank and they say, I've got a check from Norman McNickle for $2,500. Will it clear? Yes. So they make it out for $2,500. They've got the money before you know it, and you've lost not only your $1,850 or $2,500, or maybe even $25,000 if you have that much in your account. So if you remember nothing else today that we talk about other than this, you'll be fine. If it sounds too good to be true, it is. Okay? I'm going to run through a whole bunch of other things that hopefully you might save you some grief in the future. One is credit card offers. You've been approved for a $25,000 credit line, and all you need to do is fill out this information and send it back to us, and we'll send you your golly gee whiz supercalifragilistic platinum gold plus card for your use. And when you fill that out, what do you give them? You give them your social security number, your date of birth, where you bank, all those things that, again, they now have access to your information. Unsolicited credit card offers need to go where? Shredder. Absolutely. Unsolicited credit card offers need to go in the shredder. In fact, the matter is, there is a place on the internet, you'll have to Google it because I don't remember the address, but it's Mailings USA or something like that. You can actually turn off unsolicited credit card offers. You can turn off unsolicited catalog offers, all those kinds of things, and it will pretty much work. And the reason I say it'll pretty much work because there's unscrupulous people in all the businesses around that will continue to send you things. Just like I'm on the do not call list, and I get 4 or 5 calls in the last 3 weeks from different named corporations who tell me that the police in their city are very interested in me obtaining a burglar alarm for your house. And we're going to give you $1,500 of free equipment and yada, yada, yada. And because I'm on the do not call list, I shouldn't have received that call. So I punch stop and I hit caller ID and I dial back the person who, or the number where this call came from. And the answer on the other end of the line was, I expected to get a corporation, or a boiler room. And the answer on the other end of the line was, hello. And I said, is this NES Corporation? The guy said, no, and I don't know where people are getting that number, but I sure wish they'd quit calling. And I said, well, sir, if you'll bear with me for just a minute, I think I can help you out. And I said, I received a call from a company wanting to sell me a burglar alarm. They claimed they were the NES Corporation, and your number appeared in my caller ID. And he said, well, I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I've gotten 4 or 5 of these calls, and I'm sick of getting them. And I said, well, your number is being spoofed. You can actually set up, I can use my phone, put your number in it, enter it into a program, make a call, and the person that receives that call will see your telephone number on there. So that's what they've done to this poor guy who's received several calls. And it's difficult to track them back and be able to file a complaint about them violating the do not call list. You can also enter your cell phone number in the do not call list. Anybody that I want to do business with, I'll go see them. I'll make up my mind what business I'm going to do with who, and I will initiate that call. I don't like people calling me at home, wanting to try to sell me something. So, credit card and that kind of thing, the unsolicited credit card things, please shred them, because credit card fraud is huge, absolutely huge. And if you get solicitations to want to talk to some, or to provide money to some charity, once again, you can get on the internet and Google that charity, and there should be a required governmental report pop up that says how much their administrative costs are. And if their administrative costs are about 95% and 5% really goes to the charity, you probably don't want to give to them. So again, the internet is useful in that regard and be able to check out who you really want to give to. Let's see. Everybody familiar with what is generally known as the Nigerian letter. You know, I'm so-and-so, and I'm in Nigeria, or I'm in Sarajevo, or I'm in Cameroon, or I'm in wherever it may be. And my father was this very influential person, and he had lots of money stuck away during the recent revolution. And I've heard you're a good Christian person, and I'm contacting you asking for your help. And as a result of you helping me, I'll give you $500,000. Those also need to go in the, nobody's going to contact you out of the blue. Believe it or not, my email address used to be policechief@stillwater.org. And I got these things directed to that address. So one time I couldn't stand it. I emailed them back and I said, yeah, you know, do you guys, when you spam everybody with these things, you guys ever look at the email address that you're sending them to? And the person actually responded, well, I guess you're a person that doesn't want to make any money. I mean, that's how cool they are. If it sounds too good to be true, it is. Exactly. Craigslist. Various sales and purchasing sites, and not just Craigslist, but a whole lot of internet sites. Let me tell you a quick story about a captain at the PD. He owned a Corvette, wanted to sell it, listed it on Craigslist. He got an inquiry from a person, and the person called him at the office, actually, and said he wanted to buy it, but he had been looking at another Corvette, a different Corvette, on Craigslist, and it had sold already, and he already had the bank draft, and the bank draft was $3,000 more, and he told my guy that he sounded like a very trustworthy person, so he'd send him that check, and he could just send him back a check for $3,000, and my guy said, you need to know, I'm a captain at the Stillwater Police Department. The guy said, yeah, so? He said, no, I know what you're doing. I know exactly what you're doing. Your check for $18,000 or whatever it was isn't going to be any good. I know exactly what you're doing. So you probably ought to try somebody else. And the guy continued to try to tell him that he was legit. So I know another fella here in town who should remain nameless for obvious reasons that bought a antique sports car on a whatever, whether it was Craigslist or Backpage or any of those things that exist. He flew to California to get it, and he'd already paid for it. The car didn't exist. The address didn't exist. You have to be careful. One of the things about mature folks kind of our age is that we grew up in a world where we were a lot more trusting than we should be today. And it's unfortunate, but it's true. We need to not trust folks, unless you know them. I mean, it's just the way it is. You need to look at everything with a wary eye. And in some cases, that doesn't sound very Christian, but that's the way it is. And I tell you that to tell you one of the next things is there's all kinds of tax scams, lottery scams I've mentioned, work at home. You get an email from somebody that says you can make $6,000 a month working at home. Well, that guy's making $6,000 a month, taking people for their money that they have to send in to get the kit to get them started. So your money will disappear. Employment services are the same way. Disaster relief. If you're going to give money to somebody for a disaster relief, give it to the Red Cross, give it to the Salvation Army, give it to somebody you know, give it to your church, whatever. Just not to, and I'm sorry, there are some organizations that call themselves religious organizations, and they're nothing but scams, and we refer to them around the PD as the Church of What's Happening Now. And they're the folks that stand at the intersections with the buckets and the nice white shirts and the ties, and they collect money. And if you look at the 501(c), They, again, 95% of the money that they take in is for administrative costs and 5% goes to charity. It's like the folks that sit at Penn and Memorial in Oklahoma City. You see those that will work for food. Their average take is $200 a day. It's pretty good money. A whole lot of people in Stillwater don't make $200 a day. And anyway, we could go on and on about that. But give money to who you know. Give money to who you know actually supports the charity that involved. One that you guys need to know about in particular. How many of you all have grandkids or great-grandkids? Okay. And you may have heard of this. I hope you have. You receive a phone call, and it's Grandma, this is Billy. I'm in Canada. I'm in jail. I didn't do anything wrong, but you can't tell Mom and Dad. I've got to get this squared away before I know, but I need $3,500 to get out of jail. You need to go to Walmart and buy some of those cards and send them to this address, and you need to do it right now. Well, Billy, this doesn't sound like you. Well, Grandma, how would you sound if you'd been held in the Canadian jail for the last 48 hours and they're not giving you good food and they're accusing you of doing things that you didn't do and you know, Grandpa, and they calls them by name and they get all kinds of information about you and they make it sound legit. We have had people in Stillwater, Oklahoma fall for that.
How do they get that information? How is that?
LexisNexis. I'll just use myself as an example. We use LexisNexis at PD. It's a subscription fee thing that you have to, and you run Norman McNickle and you'll get my name, where I've lived for the last 15, 20 years, where I bank. It doesn't give you Social Security numbers, but near. If you're in law enforcement, they give you all that. But names of your children, names of your friends, names of your relatives, the kind of car you might be driving, where you live, your phone number, your past phone numbers, your past addresses. And all of that, if you think about it, when you fill out applications for a loan or credit or whatever, what all do you need to do that? So I just run you on LexisNexis, and I've got all that stuff, and all I need to do now is come dig through your trash, get your Social Security number, your date of birth, and woohoo, I'm done. And, you know, there's all kinds of ways to do that. Unfortunately, I've had several conversations with my church they weren't too happy about me having, because you want to accept things on faith. You want to accept people on faith. But when they're working with your children, nuh-uh. I'm sorry, no, background checks. But also, don't put my date of birth in the bulletin, please. Because the wrong people may get it. There's just all kinds of things that the normal person doesn't give a lot of consideration to that can cause someone trouble by things being published. Talk to you about roadside collections. Oh, law enforcement fundraising. You get a call that wants, and I'm going to look you all in the eye and tell you this. You get a call that says they'd like you to donate to the Oklahoma Association of Chiefs of Police or the Fraternal Order of Police. Hang up. Because in 90% of those kinds of solicitations, the best case scenario, the organization's getting 20%, and the boiler room is what we call, where they call from, boiler room, is getting 80% of it. You'd be a lot better off take a $10 check and give it to the president of the FOP, or mail it direct to the OACP, or whatever organization that you want to support. Again, you can look those things up on the internet and find out what their administrative costs are. Drugs. Us mature folks take a lot of drugs, and we have them in our home. Unfortunately, one of the largest sources of drugs for those that use them illicitly are other people's prescriptions. And they get them by using your restroom, rifling through your medicine cabinet and taking your drugs. And unfortunately, it can be a friend, it can be a relative, it can be a grandkid, it can be a kid. It can be a visitor to your home, keep your drugs where somebody can't get at them. And if you have a prescription that you're not going to use, we have a drop box, the PD, where you can come throw it away. Don't flush it down the toilet, it goes into the water supply. Even in my little town, the least populated county in the lower 48 in Colorado, where I have my cabin, OxyContin shows up in the water supply. Can you imagine that? But OxyContin, hydrocodone, all those kinds of things, you may pay $5 a pill for. I can sell on the open market for $40 a pill. So there's a monetary incentive to doing that. So if you don't take them all, bring them down to us.
Where is that drop box?
It's in the lobby of the PD. If you come during business hours, we're not going to touch it. We're just going to ask you to go over. It looks like a mailbox. You just walk over, toss it in there, and let the lid go. It gets collected by OSBI and burned.
I've done that twice, and there's no box, and some person comes out and gets it for me and takes it back down a hall.
We've changed our procedure.
Well,
And I'll just be upfront with you. We changed our procedure because we had a sergeant at the PD that stole from that box. And we prosecuted him, and he's been sentenced and is no longer a cop.
so now you have a box or you don't have a box?
We have a box in the lobby that you personally will put it in. We're not going to touch it. And then OSBI comes up, gets it, and burns it, incinerates it. And, you know, some people get really angry with this. I hope you understand this. Guns that we take in, we take them to a smelter over in Sand Springs, melt them. Why? Because I think it just looks horrible if they come from the PD and they're redistributed on the street, even through a legitimate dealer, and some crimes committed with it. If it is a firearm that we can use, that's a quality firearm, which 99% of them are not, we will have it forfeited by the DA's office and used. But there's just a lot of things that go into this whole business that some people don't think about. Wills. There is a place on the internet where you can write your own will. And it's pretty handy. And it works well. But as with all of your computer passwords, identifying names, that kind of thing, you really need to protect that. We recently worked a case here in Stillwater where person developed their will online. They died, and sure enough, some distant relatives that had managed to worm the password out of him changed it before he died, and we filed charges on people for fraud. So any passwords that you have, your Social Security number, hopefully, and I know there's some of you are going to say, well, I have something from the VA that I've got to carry with me that's got my Social Security number on it. That's really silly, and they need to change that. Don't carry your Social Security number in your billfold.
It's on our Medicare card.
Yeah, that's what, so
Is
can we
it?
not carry our Medicare card? Or-
No, you need to carry it.
I know,
You need to carry it. It's just silly. It really is. It's horrible.
right.
Because if I have that, I have you. So that's something the United States government needs to change.
Does it need to be wrapped in foil?
That probably wouldn't help. I could probably get the foil off of it. But that's one of the things listed on that sheet. You know, if at all possible, don't carry identifying information like that in your wallet.
If you have that in your wallet and it gets stolen, what's the proper procedure to that?
Report it immediately. And then you need to call the credit card companies, your bank, everybody. I mean, I don't know if I said this earlier. I even had my pledge done to my church electronically. I feel guilty every time the offering plate passes, you know, because people are looking at you saying, you didn't put anything in. How come?
The chief of police
I'm sorry?
The chief of police never contributed.
That's right. That's right. You kind of want to stand up and say, I gave electronically. But home repair, something else you need to, if somebody comes by and wants to fix something, they're not probably good people. We have a lot of folks that get burned on blacktop roofing, painting scams here in town, and it's, you know, in our case, it's really sad to see because a lot of people are on fixed incomes, they don't have a lot of money, and the odds of catching those folks are pretty slim because first of all, you got to find them, you got to prove criminal intent, which, believe it or not, can be difficult to do even if they do a lousy job on the roof. They did a lousy job. And that person has to be able to identify them. And sometimes us mature folks have trouble with that. So best thing to do is choose somebody of your own that you know to do any kind of contracting work that you need done. Chain emails, do I need to say anything more? A lot of them have a religious connotation about them. You need to hit the delete button. Chain emails, they're bad. Talked about the inheritance scam. Health fraud, you all know that your Medicaid card and that kind of thing, you need to keep that to yourself. We have had a recent case here of what we call three-card Monty, and that's where a person approaches, again, generally a mature person, and they say, hey, we have this game going and there's 3 cards involved, and you have to pick the right card, and it's they kind of slowly get you indoctrinated in this thing where you're winning all kinds of money and they owe you lots of money, and they say, well, I need to get my money back and I'm willing to make a $10,000 bet with you. Let's go to your bank so that you have the money and I have the money and get that 10 grand, and you bet. And they've got them hook, line, and sinker at that point, and the money gets all commingled and wrapped up in this package, and it's actually handed back to the person who's gone to the bank and got the money. But it is a different package once they get a hold of it. And they win, and these people are all discouraged because they lost all their money and they disappear with the real money. So if it sounds too good to be true, it is. Land deals, same thing. These free vacation things where they try to get you to buy timeshares and that kind of thing, you have to be real careful about. And one last one, anybody that, and these don't happen very often anymore, but they do still on occasion happen. 876 area code. Don't dial it.
What?
876. You'll get an email or a phone call or something that says call 88, and the people on the other end of the phone speak broken English, and they keep you on the phone as long as they can because it's like $50 a minute for the long distance charge, and the government, like in Jamaica, condones this, and you really do have to pay $50 a minute. And they keep you on there as long as they can. Again, computer, Google the area code, find out where it is. If it's outside the United States, don't call it. So we've pretty much covered everything. Seriously, you need to look at this sheet of paper, and if you're not doing it, start doing those things. Those are the most effective things you can do to keep yourself from being a victim of a crime. The other thing that I would urge you to do, I've worked for the city of Stillwater for 38 years now in all kinds of capacity in law enforcement, and I'm amazed that I still hear from people, well, I didn't want to bother you, but. Well, you have every right in the world to bother me because you pay my salary. You've put 2 of my kids through dental school. You pay my salary. If you think something's wrong, call. We would a lot rather run on 99 things that are nothing than one thing where we may have been able to catch somebody in the act of doing something bad and not have that information. Because, you know, we go to work a burglary and we hear somebody say, well, you know, it looked kind of funny, but didn't want to bother you, and I thought it was nothing, and maybe they were working on their pool, or call us. That's what we're there for.